Good morning, everyone. So my name is Matthias Fuchs. You can just call me Matt Fuchs, and I'm the author of the all-new Enterprise Memory Forensics in-depth class. And I'm delighted to tell you a little bit about the class, what the content's going to be, how you can use that in your day job, and so on. So let's get started right away. Oh, by the way, on the right-hand side of the screen, what you see there is the new coin. So it's actually not really a coin anymore. I wanted to have something useful, right? Something that helps you every day. So we do have a bottle opener and a screwdriver here. So that's going to be awesome. I didn't see it in reality myself yet. Hope that comes pretty soon, but it is in production. So probably the people in Brussels will see that first. Looking forward to that. Okay, first of all, the question is, what are we doing with that class, right? There used to be a memory forensics class already, the 526 class. How does that translate into a 532 class? Why didn't we just extend the 526 class? Well, actually, it's a little bit different from where we're coming from when we designed the 532 class. So originally, memory forensics used to be a very good in-between kind of thing between sweeps in an incident response case where we would look at a large number of machines and full drive forensics, because obviously memory would be somewhere in the middle size-wise, right? So memory was often a good place to start. Now, over the last few years, there was a lot of development into triaging systems. So Eric Zimmerman came up with the CAPE tool that allows triage acquisitions. Plazo, or log to timeline, is getting better and better in working on less data to create a very useful timeline. And we're talking about data sizes of often less than 1 or 2 gigabytes. Memory is usually bigger than that. So it sort of got a little bit out of focus when it came to triaging. And I think that that's good, right? Because we got faster that way in incident response. However, it would be totally wrong to not use memory forensics in incident response. Just the way of how we need to use it and the way of what we can do with it changed a little bit. So that's all, and that's why we wrote an entirely new class that bases on the enterprise part of memory forensics. I mean, obviously, you still need to know the ins and outs of memory and how memory works in modern operating systems, but you also learn how to apply that knowledge to a multitude of computers, right? So rather than looking at just a single machine, you can apply that knowledge to many machines all at once to get the incident response process a little bit more efficient. So this is the idea of how we came up with that class. To put it in different terms, that is actually a slide that is coming right out of the class. We also have a very similar slide in the 608 class, which I'm also co-authoring. And it's talking about visibility, because that sort of helps me a little bit to make you understand what the difference between the 526 and 532 classes. So in the 526 class, we were mostly talking about vertical visibility. So we have two types of visibility. Vertical visibility tells you how deep you look into a certain system, while horizontal visibility tells you how many systems you even see. Because if you think about the real case, if you look at one single machine and it looks clean, that doesn't tell you anything about the rest of the population, right? If you have horizontal visibility and you see all the machines, but you do not have ability to see a lot on all of these machines, you also might probably miss a few things. So that means, in a nutshell, you do need visibility in a horizontal grade, but also on a vertical axis. And that horizontal visibility with classical memory forensics is totally missing. And that's what we're going to change with this class. And that makes it applicable in the incident response era. I mean, that's what I do. That's my day job. I'm running an incident response team, and that's how we use it. So this is the idea. So let's cut to the chase right away and get into the challenges that well, made us work on a class. Well, we do have more and more fileless malware. We have breaches where the dwell time is pretty fast. Think about all of those ransomware breaches. I mean, a couple of years ago, we were talking about several weeks from the first entry into the network until encryption. Now, most of the time, it's about a day or maybe 2 or 3 days from first entry into the network to encryption. The effect for us in memory forensics is that a lot of information might still live in memory of the machines that are still running. right? So if we can get our hands on that memory, it might help us with a ton of things. For example, getting access to the exfiltration data or to log in data for exfiltration platforms that the attackers used. That is a use case that we use quite often. So when we know what kind of tool set the attackers used to exfiltrate data, very often memory will still retain some of the login data for these platforms. And you can pass them on to law enforcement. You can use it yourself. I mean, that totally depends on the jurisdiction you are working in. Then we see more and more anti-forensics. There's almost never a client that does not have some kind of an EDR or EDR-ish solution rolled out. In that regard, even low-tier attackers need to get a little bit better and get around these to a certain extent. And when we think about that, that means they also need to apply some anti-forensics and so on. Secondly, they know pretty much how these tools work. And as they know how these tools work, it's super important for us to find other ways how we can still detect them when the tools fail. And memory is a very good place because hiding stuff in memory is really, really difficult, especially if you really want it to run and work. At the same time, full memory acquisition is not feasible for a large number of hosts. First of all, how would you get them into one place? How would you store them? How would you process them? You can totally do that for like a couple of dozen of machines, but not for thousands. It doesn't make sense. I mean, probably technically you could do it, but it's not efficient. And in incident response today, it's all about efficiency. And that means that memory forensics also needs to go down that road and be very very efficient. So what should you learn by the end of the class? Well, first of all, get your hands on memory. So we need to have different ways to acquire memory, parts of memory, full memory, whatever. We also need to really understand how memory works. That was a great part in the 526 class as well. So a lot of time went into how memory works, right? Now it's a slight bit different. We're probably gonna do like 3/4 of a day where we look into data structures. The rest is right on applying that knowledge. We're gonna look into a modified version of a malware detection method or methodology, where we walk through different steps that should give you 99% of the malware that is out there pretty quickly in that process. And a large part is about scaling memory forensics, scaling it to the enterprise. So that means finding ways to do partial memory analysis, offload the workloads for that to the endpoints. That makes it possible to scale it to whatever size you want. And the other thing is, if you have to go for partial or full memory acquisitions, then at least we want to speed up the processing, right? So we want to make sure that you have ways to save resources in the processing department. So everything that can be automated will be automated. And you will learn a few ways of how to do that. By the way, you can apply most of those not just only for memory forensics, but also for other forensic tasks as well. And the part that I personally use very much is unstructured data analysis. So we're going to cover quite a few techniques for unstructured data analysis that help us to find data, even though we don't fully understand the underlying structure of the blob of the data set that we're working on. Because that speeds up investigations and there is no support lag there. That's a good thing about it. In structured analysis, if someone updates an operating system, the tools need to adapt to that, right? In unstructured analysis, you don't really care about that because you don't care about structure and changes to the structure. Okay, so let's look into the days. So we made it a 4-day class. The reason for that is I wanted to make it feasible and I wanted to point out that this is an addition for existing incident responders, right? So no one goes to a company and says, okay, I'm your full-time memory forensicator. That's not going to happen, right? So it's an add-on for an incident responder, and we wanted to reflect that on the day schedule here a little bit. Secondly, and that's also important, obviously some things cannot be covered, and this is not going to be an academic class, right? So there are a few things that you will not find in that class that you might find in other memory forensics classes, and that's the academic part. So those are the things where we talk about attacks that could technically be possible, but probably it has never proven that they happen. They have never been seen in the wild, and so on. So we're not talking about these things. We're talking about reality there. So that helps us to save some time for content that you can really apply in breaches. So everything you find in there, you can apply in breaches. That was super important to me, and that's how we got to this 4-day class. Um, in that 4-day class, I wanted to put a capstone in for multiple reasons. So the obvious reason is that it gives you the ability to try out all the techniques that you learned throughout the week. And secondly, I wanted to have a cool coin. So and I wanted to hand you a cool coin over after you win the capstone. It's gonna be a scoreboard style capstone so that you play online. And you will be provided with different images. You will have some more trivia-like questions to go through that. So I'm doing that like the wrong way around because I started out with the capstone, but that's the ultimate goal, to get through the capstone nicely. So that's why I started there. Day one is very much building a common foundation. So usually when you do classes that are technically challenging, you have people who are more adapted to that level of depth and some are not so much adapted to that level of depth. We have that in the other classes as well. So I've also been teaching 508 for H's, teaching 608 and so on. And always in the first day, we need to form a common foundation. That's what's going to happen there. So we're going to talk about how is memory working. We're really going down deep, right? Deep into memory management and all that, but we're also starting at a manageable level of depth in there. So you don't need to have prior knowledge in memory forensics to get through that. That is very important as well, because otherwise I think it would not be a good addition for an incident responder who never touched memory forensics. On day two, we're going to dive deeper. So that means we're going to go into the details very soon, that we also look into user artifacts. So why are user artifacts interesting? I mean, that's, police work and not so much incident response. Well, first of all, we do some policey kind of work every now and then when we think about insider threats. That's number one. But secondly, especially those lower tier attackers, when we think about the ransomware actors, they often use RDP and other Windows graphic protocols to work whatever they need to do in the systems. And for that reason, they leave a ton of user artifacts lying around. And these user artifacts can help you. Think about shellbacks, for example. Shellbacks tell you where a certain user browsed to. That might be interesting because it tells you what they were looking for, and that could be an indication for what they were trying to exfiltrate or what they were trying to do in that breach. And there are a ton of other user artifacts that we're going to look through it. On day three, we do have the foundation to know what we want to have, right? So that means at this point, we're going to extend that to the whole enterprise, right? So we're going to look into techniques to make what we made work on one machine on thousands of machines. This is the idea there. We also put some Linux memory forensics into the mix on that day because in enterprise settings, you might come across Linux machines, and it's not as straightforward as it is for Windows. So that is something I have to say to that. Everything else would be a lie. I mean, Windows is just way more standardized than Linux will ever be, which is good on one hand, but not so much for memory forensics. And then on day on day four, the first half of day four, pretty much, we look a little bit further. We look beyond classical memory forensics. So we're going to look into things like Docker, for example. So when you have containerization, is memory forensics something that could help you or not? And this is what we're going to cover there. Let's go a little bit more into details for day one. So I already said that fundamentals of memory. We're going to look into memory acquisition, not just for Windows, but also for Linux. Another thing that we scrapped out for now is macOS memory forensics because it is a total pain to get your hands on Mac memory. And with every version they bring out, it's getting harder. So the thing is, in incident, I'm an incident responder at heart, right? We need to do things that are efficient. And Mac memory forensics is not efficient because you keep running behind their updates. And that makes it just not very suitable, right? That is why we scrape that out. Maybe we might, if there is demand for that, we might extend that. And we definitely talk a little bit about it, but we do not have acquisition labs for that. We look a little bit into volatility. The reason for that is when you're going to that class, you might be coming out of a 4,500 class, of a 508 class, for example. When you come out of these classes, you were already exposed a little bit to memory forensics. And memory forensics for years has been synonymous for volatility, or volatility has been synonymous for memory forensics. And that is why we start out a little bit with volatility, just to catch up, right? To address all the things that some of you, when you go to that class, know already. But then we quickly shift over to memprocfs, which is I would say, newer development. memprocfs was more targeted at game modders and probably game crackers and stuff. But recently they had made, so Ulf Frisk, who is the author of that, had made a great leap towards forensics and incident response. So he's been working with Chad Tilbury for the 508 class a lot. I've been working with him with some of the requirements, and it's super powerful. The reason why we have to shift there is that volatility shifted the version from version 2 to version 3. So you might know, because version 2 was written in Python 2. Python 2 is not supported any longer. Volatility 3 uses Python 3 and gets around that problem. And it's getting faster. The problem is that comes as a cost, And the cost for volatility 3 being way faster than volatility 2 is that it gets rid of all the live capability. So with volatility 2, you could attach, for example, to a WinPmem driver, and you could do live memory analysis. You cannot do that with volatility 3 any longer, right? So that is one of the capabilities they scraped. As we want to scale, as we want to work in live incident response, it's probably not going to be the right tool for us in the future. Okay, but memprocfs is very different there. It allows live access even in well, I would say, very groundbreaking setups. So you can even attach to a memory of a running VMware machine, right, from the outside, and work on that memory. So it might also be interesting for malware analysis in that regard. We use some of the tools to understand memory structures. So how are eProcess linked together, right? How can you start hiding processes and so on? What are modules, what drivers, and so on. We'll look into memory management, because memory management is obviously very important. And in memory forensics, you need to know where to find something, right? And the memory manager is who is in charge of putting things where they end up. So that is mainly the reason why you need to understand some bits and pieces of memory management. Then we'll look into the first 3 steps of that finding malware process to identify malware. And most of the malware you already find with these steps. If you don't find it with these steps, you're going to find it on the next day with step number 4 and 5. So you're going to look at different injection techniques, less complex ones, more complex ones. So I'm going to discuss all that. One interesting thing is DKOM, direct kernel object manipulation. We're going to look into that, and not just look into that. So what you will do, you will get a virtual Windows machine, and you're going to hide a process using DKOM yourself. So you're going to open up a calculator, because that's something you can see on the screen, and everyone uses calculator for proof of concept, so that's why we use it as well. And you also open a task manager. In the task manager, you can obviously see calculator running, right? What you do then is you open Windows Debugger, you connect to your currently running kernel, and you just unlink the process out of the list of processes. And you can see that the calculator is still running on the screen, it's still usable, but at the same time, it vanishes from Task Manager. And this is what malware can do. I mean, obviously, there are some safeguards in newer Windows systems called PatchGuard, but there are also ways around it. I mean, we're not going to do the highest sophisticated thing a malware can do today, obviously, but we're going to try it out on a manageable level. So you just did that yourself, and you see how much you can interfere with memory and how that translates to what you see in your Windows operating system. So that's incredible when you see that the first time. So it was really, really funny for me to try it out, because I never thought it would work the first time, but it did. Then we use Windows Debugger a little bit. To be honest, it's not my favorite tool, but it's probably the best that we have on Windows for this kind of analysis. The reason for that is we can look into crash dumps pretty easily, and we can also do some live analysis with it, locally and remotely. So that's why you at least need to have some understanding of how that tool works. And then you can go from there. We'll look into artifact extraction. So you found something in memory that's interesting and you want to get it out. Then you need to have a ways to extract it. And the last part is user artifacts. So all the artifacts a human user leaves on the system when working, when attacking, when whatever. Like, okay. On day 3, we're going to look into Linux memory forensics, how you need to set everything up, how you need to prepare everything for it. And then we look into enterprise memory forensics. So first of all, we figure out how we can even do enterprise memory forensics. So which concepts will work in the enterprise, which concepts don't work that well in enterprises. Okay, the tool of choice is like in so many other classes, Velociraptor. And you will write your own Velociraptor artifacts. We'll actually write 2 different ones. You will write one for Windows, and you will write one for Linux. We then look into the automation part. That also helps you scaling, because the less your analysts need to do manually, I mean, all that repetitive stuff, the more they have time to do real analysis work. So automation can also help you to increase efficiency there. And then we look into unstructured memory analysis. So we're going to look what we can do with tools like bulk extractor, for example, but also a few other tools that help you there. And this is only half a day, or not, probably not even half a day. So it has a little bit of run over space from the day before. But we'll look into Docker memory forensics. It sounds odd in the beginning, but you will pretty soon see that it can be quite useful. In a nutshell, what will happen there is, because obviously Docker images, or in general containers, are very short-lived. And to sort of make that realistic, you will be attacking a containerized application yourself. You will attack that first, and then you will analyze what you did. So it's actually a vulnerable GitLab instance that you run in a container. And the goal as an attacker is to exfiltrate the source code repository. And as an analyst, you need to figure out what happened. So you see both sides. So you see what you do as an attacker. On the other hand, you see how that translates into evidence. So that is what I always find interesting, to see both sides of that coin. And what was sort of coming out of a requirement, we'll look a little bit into custom volatility plugins. The main reason for that is Volatility 3 got faster, but one of the downsides is the plugin support is not where Volatility 2's plugin support was, right? So there are way fewer plugins for Volatility 3 than for Volatility 2. So if Volatility is what you use and Volatility 3 is what you use, it's just going to be like a short lab and a little bit of introduction how the plugins work there, so you can extend it for yourself. That was a requirement that some had, and that's why we have it in. And the last part, obviously, is the final capstone. I already pointed out that this is going to be a scoreboard type thing, and the first the top 5 scorers in there will win the coin, like in the other SANS classes. There is one more disclaimer here, and that's particularly going for that part 2 of the last day. You might ask yourself, that's a question we get a lot, how you deal with the Volatility 3 license, which is kind of new. So they made their own license. It's not the license that anyone else uses. And it asks us, or demands us, to make that public. And I said, it's not a real problem, so we're just going to make that public. So before the class comes out, I just need to figure out some details of how to get that thing on the SANS webpage. We're going to make all the slides, the labs, and so on. We're going to make that public. So you can use that, you can try it out even without going to the class. You just won't hear my cool voice. That's all. That's the limitation there. But other than that, we make that public, because I don't see any problem in that, really. But as long as we keep that Volatility 3 part in there, that's what's going to happen. So with that, I hope it's something that is interesting for some of you. It's really going to integrate well into your incident response process. It will speed up things. That is for sure. We use that quite a lot. And yeah, that is about it. So I wish you a great day. And thanks for staying with me for 25 minutes.